Welcome to the Cannabis Detector podcast. No sugar, all spice. With the industry BS detector in residence, Kristen Yoder.
Hello, my cannabis detectors. Thank you for joining me for another episode in this brand new year of 2020. I'm super excited to have my guest, Chris Tenaglia of Valiant America. Or is it just Valiant?
Valiant Group.
Valiant Group. Okay, perfect. So yeah, you're in the construction industry, part of the cannabis industry. And Mike, your CMO, was reaching out, and I talked to Eamon, last month. And, I hear you guys experience a lot of the BS, but the type of BS you have to deal with is a lot more expensive and laborious. So I'm excited to have you on. But why don't you let people know what you guys do?
So first of all, thank you very much for having us on today. So my name is Chris Tenaglia with Valiant. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. But our business and core model is construction, mainly focused on the cannabis sector. Our business is a little bit different than most of the other general contractors in the country. Is we have a vertically integrated team where we have all of our trades in-house, or most of them. We have our own electricians, HVAC contractors, and plumbers, and our carpenters all inside our own house under one roof. That way we can control the quality of the build throughout the entire process rather than using subcontractors for most of the build out and not being able to control the quality or the expensive change orders. So
yeah, when it comes to contractors, that's definitely helpful to have it all in-house and not have to get other people.
Correct. So we can actually control the quality of the materials that go in and the quality of the work by keeping our eye on everybody, and they can all be trained in by our internal team rather than having somebody with either a bogus resume or having to trust that the experience of a subcontractor is the par that you want it to be. And then you're not locked into the contract with them. We can have our own guys do it.
How long have you guys been working in the cannabis industry?
The company's been around for about 10 years now. And we've started out doing commercial projects throughout the country, and we've specifically been focused on the cannabis industry for about 9.5 years now.
And where are you guys located?
We're out of our main office is in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Okay. So have you focused mostly on East Coast cannabis, or have you had projects all over the country?
We've had projects all over the country. Colorado, made our way to California, up to Washington State, and then back to the Northeast, mainly because the environment in the Northeast is drastically different than everywhere else in the country, and it's incredibly difficult to build and keep your internal environment than here than it is anywhere else because of the humidity levels and the drastic changes in temperatures.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
We saw the need and we saw the lack of expertise in that area, and we decided to take that on.
How is it going on the East Coast as far as compliance? Before we started recording, I was talking about how in Washington, one of the edible companies I worked with had to do a lot of build outs, and then the state would change regulations, and it got to the point where they had to move buildings and lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in construction because that's how it goes generally. How's it going on the East Coast? Is it as annoying with the regulatory changes?
It's not as drastic where people have to move buildings, but the regulatory changes are definitely a problem. One of the most recent changes where the state didn't realize how much energy and how much electricity that these mill buildings or these massive cultivation facilities would actually be using. So it's putting a major drain on the power grid, especially in the towns that haven't been developed in a long time, because that's where most of the cultivation facilities are going, is towns that either need money or the towns don't have a good working population. So they're looking to get any type of industry that they can, but their power grid hasn't been upgraded in a long time, and it's putting a major drain on the system. So like the high pressure sodium lights that typical growers like to use, they're putting a restriction on the wattage per square foot down to 36 watts per square foot across your entire, it used to be just the canopy, and now it's your entire facility. So basically makes it so the high pressure sodium lights are completely useless and you cannot use them. So anybody who has the high pressure sodium lights in has to change all of those out and put in LEDs, which could be an incredibly expensive endeavor on their end.
Yeah, I mean, I tried growing at home in a little tent and I just used an LED because there's no freaking way I could deal with the heat. And even with the LED, I had to bring in an air conditioner and my power bill was like $500 a month. So that's just in a 5 by 5 foot tent in Los Angeles. I can't even imagine. I mean, you talk to some growers, they're so anti-LED when it's like that must be difficult for them to have to, a lot of growers to have to adjust the way they grow with different lights. And that's just one part because there's all of the environmental controls as well. So that's a lot of
It's very
work.
difficult just to convince the growers to come back and go to LEDs. In reality, that's when you're saying that there's a bullshit detector. The LEDs came so far with the technology and the level of diodes and how much technology actually goes into them. So we're partners with a company called Agrify, which Aventronics is the third largest lighting manufacturer in the world, and we've learned so much about LEDs and how far they've came from when they originally started, where they weren't dimmable, they didn't have the full spectrum, to now where they put out the same amount of power and the same amount of spectrum as a normal high pressure sodium. And one of the issues where the growers have is they don't put out as much heat as a high pressure sodium does. So they say, yep, let me just change my light and we'll grow the same environment on one to the other, but they're not taking into consideration the entire environment that changes. You have to adjust your entire grow method in order for that environment to be the same for both the LED and the high pressure sodium. So if you just change out the light, now your temperature drops drastically and you're growing a plant in a less than optimal scenario. So sometimes when they do those two comparisons, they're incorrect.
Yeah, that makes sense. I thought that the LED did good for me, but that was so long ago. And I know that some of the most stubborn people in the industry are the growers. So it's a tough sell to get them to switch over. But in Denver, I know that they had such a problem with the power grid with all of those massive grows that they basically told people you have to cut down your energy use by this much by this time or you can't operate. So everyone has to make adjustments. That's just how it goes. And
exactly.
That's where the
they
money
rendered it
comes
obsolete.
in. Exactly. And that's another thing is, I mean, it's already very expensive to do cultivation, period. It's like one of the most expensive upfront costs for the sector. So that's interesting. I never really thought about the East Coast, but you guys get really freaking cold during the winter and you do have humidity. So how do people deal with keeping the warmth? I mean, I've never even thought of people using heat in a grow, but they have to, right?
Yes, they have to. It's a major problem out here in Massachusetts. So it's incredibly cold in the wintertime and very hot and humid in the summertime. So you have to double up on your HVAC, your insulation barrier, your thermodynamics become a major issue. And the engineering that goes into one of these grows is twice as much as it is over in Denver or, say, Arizona, where it's very dry with no humidity. So you have to make sure that your environment and your climate that's inside whatever size room you're using is perfect, or else you will get mold. And Massachusetts has one of the highest regulations for the testing for mold, because some states only test the bad bacteria for mold. Massachusetts counts all of the mold, either good or bad. It doesn't matter. You can't have any inside your plant. So the fail rate in Massachusetts is astronomical.
Man, how do people survive? You know, I just can't, I don't understand how these people survive without millions of dollars when you have such strict regulations and such poor environmental issues you have to deal with. But that's literally what you guys are helping with, right?
Correct. That's why we decided to become experts in the industry and find out all the newest growing methods and talk to the best engineers in the business and understand that thermodynamics and what type of equipment to use. And that's the reason why we partnered up with Agrify, where they came up with the proprietary system of the VFU, the vertical farming unit, where it takes a microclimate and you don't have to worry about your ambient temperature in the room. It's a grow box that's a 2-tiered system. Your lights, your dehumidification, your HVAC, your chiller lines, and your fertigation and irrigation is all inside the one unit, and it's self-contained, and it kind of keeps its own 64 square foot microclimate rather than having to keep your entire ambient temperature. It at least helps to be able to mitigate all those risks from the outside environment.
How difficult is it? I mean, it sounds to me like these are expensive things. And I know a lot of people have the cannabis dream and they have no idea how much it's going to cost them. And they really try to shortchange things in a lot of different ways. How often do you come across people trying to go the cheapest way possible?
Well, they cut out the cheap. They cheap out on sometimes the dumb things, the things that they shouldn't cheap out on. They'll try to cheap out. They'll buy your lights are one of your most important things, and they'll buy the lights that are on sale from some manufacturer, some place where the diodes and those lights, the LEDs, are so old that they're functioning at 60% of what they used to be, what their optimal supposed to be. They'll cheap out on their HVAC systems. They'll do things that actually make the cultivation facility what it is. And a lot of times you'll that's where your inefficiency comes in, and they'll pay the price down the line for that to redesign or to try to fix it after the fact. And it's very difficult when you make a full clean room and you're trying to do construction in that to fix somebody else's mistake because they cheaped out in the beginning. And one of the issues that they're running into is, again, the cannabis industry isn't federally legal, so the banks aren't involved. So it's very difficult for these people to get loans. So they have to raise all their money either from private equity or they have to give up their equity in the business. And that can get very expensive at some points. So again, the company like Agrify or a couple of these larger companies that are multi-billions of dollars, they're able to finance some of the equipment for you so you don't have to give up your equity. And it's very difficult to get financing, and it's very difficult to give up some of your equity because of how expensive the grows are out here on this side of the country. In California, Colorado, you can do outdoor grows, you can do a greenhouse where the cost is a third of what it is out here. So the barrier to entry is very high, as you were saying. It does take millions of dollars, and you can't underestimate how much it's going to take.
What's the ratio of people calling you because they need you to fix their mistakes versus people calling you to get things set up correctly in the first place? Right now, it's about half and half. The people have learned from their mistakes, and they're hiring the correct engineers. They're not hiring people from across the country, and they're hiring the correct architects that have done one of these before and understand the environment. Before it was about 70-30, and now it's even down to about 50-50 of new construction to somebody that had built their facility, and now they're asking us to come in and fix it because they have a mold problem and they can't figure out why. Yeah, it's so expensive. I mean, I try to tell people when you start growing, you have to have everything to start with because it's so hard to backtrack. And I can't even imagine in the Northeast how much work that must be to backtrack, especially once you have mold. I mean, the spores all over the place. It sounds very intense. What has been the best state that you've worked in as far as ease?
As far as ease? Colorado Colorado and California by far, just because the environment is so dry. It's so simple. It's a easy build. There's not a harsh environment to grow in. Very difficult to screw it up, basically.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely got to be more difficult. It seems like the licensing situations on the East Coast are moving a lot slower, and they tend to be a lot more difficult to pass things in the smaller townships and everything like that. Do you guys work with any of the local governments, or do you consult for any of the regulators to try and help them out? Or because it seems like they don't really pay attention on their own.
We've gotten a few calls to help consult, and to a couple of the smaller towns. They've asked us to help them with odor mitigation and things like that to understand. Someone would submit them a set of plans, and they don't understand how the odor mitigation works and why. How the ozone, how they're taking ozone and pumping it into a facility to try to kill the odor before it hits the outside, so they won't have that type of nuisance. and we have to explain to them how that actually works. So we've gotten a few different calls on that. We've consulted with the towns. But to your point, the towns over here in Massachusetts and the East Coast, they have a very good process of vetting people out and a very good application process. They've definitely done it right. The only thing is that their speed to market is a very slow process. So you're waiting almost a little over a year. If you put your application in today, you won't hear back for your provisional license. But so if they have a submitted application, provisional license, and commence operations is what the procedure is, and you won't get your provisional license where you can start building your facility for about a year, maybe a year and a couple months. And people also underestimate that because you have to be prepared to wait that entire time, either funding whoever your grower is, paying your architectural engineering fees, have retainers for people. It's a very expensive process just to hurry up and wait. That makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the worst when you still have to pay the lease, but you don't have any way to make any money out of the building because you're waiting on the licensing. It's the same in California, I've seen.
Exactly. And when you're raising money and you have to pitch that to an investor, hey, we want to do this facility. Here's our pro forma. This is what we think we're going to be making. This is what the current wholesale market is. By the way, we have to pay $1 million in a lease over the next year just to be able to have the opportunity to have a license in the state. It's a very tough sell.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I saw in New Jersey, they've been having a lot of mold problems and their dispensary products aren't doing super well. And it doesn't seem like they're very on top of their regulations. Is there major differences from each state? Because I always kind of think that they are similar, but I guess that's a West Coast assumption. How varied are they?
State has its own regulations. Like Michigan and Massachusetts are very similar. Illinois is very different than Massachusetts. They work off of a little bit more of a lottery system. Massachusetts works off of a merit system. Each state has their differences in the way that they get licenses, and then they also have their differences on their testing. Sometimes their extraction gets tested different than other states, and like Massachusetts, just as an example, because we just did one, if it's a butane extraction, they have a very set standard of a very low residual parts per billion in the butane that's left over inside of the extraction material that you can sell in your stores. California, it's very high. It's a very simple way to do it. You do your butane extraction and you can pass. In Massachusetts, it's much stricter. So the regulations vary state to state drastically sometimes.
Do you do extraction facilities as well as cultivation?
We do cultivation, extraction, and commercial kitchens, and as well as dispensaries.
What's the most expensive build-outs, do you think, of all the sectors?
Oh, definitely cultivation.
Interesting. Yeah, it sucks because growers are the backbone of the industry, yet they pay the most up front and they get paid the least for the flower, especially as more people come online. Have you found that it's been a problem for cultivations to stay operating once they get going?
Not in Massachusetts because the supply is so low. The regulations on the flower that passes is so high, the barrier to entry is so high that there's a massive shortage in the amount of flower right now. Wholesale in Massachusetts is among the highest in the country, just from a cultivation standpoint. So if you did have the funding and you did have the correct time frame and the right team to get up and running, and you did make flower that is passing your tests, you have zero problem, and you can't even keep product inside it. As that product is drying, it's going right out the door. There's zero problem with that. It's the problem, the barrier to entry to get to the market. So once that barrier to entry does loosen, that problem might go away, but right now it's not an issue.
So what's the most common type of BS you guys run into as construction and working for cannabis companies?
The most common, there's a couple. One of them is cannabis cultivation and dispensaries. The way that the regulations are written, it's not normal construction. Cultivation, it's constantly changing. One, the regulations are changing, and two, the growers and the owners never really see eye to eye. sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So the grower, sometimes the owner and the engineer will have to design a facility around a grower. And if the grower decides that they want to leave, they leave the owner holding the bag, not knowing how to run that facility appropriately. So a lot of the growers out here in Mass, they were used to growing a lot smaller scale. And then all of a sudden they say, yep, I've grown before. I've did a home grow, or I've grown a very small facility. And then all of a sudden they're handed a 100,000 square foot facility and they say, yep, I could do this. But growing at scale, as you know, with anything is incredibly difficult and very difficult to manage. So
Definitely.
That's where a lot of the bullshit comes in, where we're, as experts in the contracting field, we're saying, you can't do this. This will not work. You can't have a room this big. Your temperature difference will be totally different from one side to the other. There's no possible way you can hold your humidity in this room. And they won't believe us, and they tend to believe the grower in that aspect. And sometimes it ends up turning for the worse after the build-out is already done.
Yeah, growers they're unique people. I like to liken them to cats. You don't own growers, growers do their own thing, you get out of the way. They know what they're doing, but it's true. When you go from a smaller grow to a massive cultivation, that's a ton of work. So do you ever just feel like, okay, well, this isn't going to work, but I guess if this is what you want, or are you just like, we can't do this?
As Valiant, we won't put our name behind something that we don't believe in, and we've upset a lot of customers that way, but we refuse to have anybody say a bad thing about us. We will not build a facility that we don't feel comfortable and won't work. It's just
great.
Not in our business practice, and it's not the way that we do. We have a core team. We work with a select set of engineers and architects that we know will design an appropriate facility, and they trust us to build it the right way. So one of the other issues that we run into, the massive, like you say, bullshit, is the owners will a lot of times consider this a normal construction build. So a lot of times the owners, somebody who made it big in another industry and then decided because it's cannabis and they see the money train, they want to all of a sudden build a cultivation facility. So they'll select their architect that's never done a cultivation facility before. They'll select an engineer that's never done one of these before. And they'll have their own set of plans, and we won't have a direct line of communication between the two. Even though it looks good on paper, we say, listen, this is not going to work. Not in this environment. Yes, the math works out, but it's not going to work at a practical standpoint. And a lot of times it's very difficult setting in RFIs or having to explain something like that to a prideful engineer or an architect. So we like to take a lot of that in-house and be able to do more of a design-build approach. And once we do that, the line of communication is streamlined, and you don't have as many RFIs or any change orders that have to go inside the job because it's being designed as everyone collaborates for their own ideas and make sure that the building's going to be designed the right way the first time.
That makes sense. Oh yeah, totally. So, I'm kind of a dick in the sense that when people are like, oh, I know better, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to enjoy watching you fail. And I know that's not always great, but do you ever see people that came to you and were like, no, we're not going to work with you, and then they fail?
Yes, it's happened a few times.
Yeah.
We actually had a phone call today about that. They came back with their hat in hand and said, listen, we should listen to the first time. Listen, can we put the past behind us and let's start from scratch? And we said, yeah, of course. Let's do it the right way. Are you going to listen this time? Yes. Fantastic. Let's go.
What an expensive mistake, But I think last year was really a slap in the face to everyone who thought they could come in and do it better than the people in the industry. There were a lot of people eating their words for sure. So do you think this year, do you have hope that this year people will start paying more attention and listening to people in the industry?
Yes, there's a few different reasons for that. One, in Massachusetts, people have set themselves up as consultants, and they're not consultants. They've been construction consultants before, but they haven't necessarily been cannabis consultants. And just because they know how to fill out applications doesn't mean that they're a true consultant. And their owners' reps are paying thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, to have these people on a retainer that aren't giving them good advice. And a lot of those people have been vetted up, all the mistakes like you stakes, and they've been weeded out, and all of a sudden So a lot of the good people and a lot of the good companies are starting to bubble to the top, and they've been coming either people that we spoke with before and said, "I'm sorry, we can't work with you. This isn't going. This build is going to fail." And they've been coming back to us saying, "Hey, listen, we're going to do it the right way. We understand your reputation in the industry is flawless, and that's what we would like to be a part of that." And I think that 2020 is going to be the year that you'll see a lot more people, especially in the state of Massachusetts and the Northeast, be able to actually execute on the builds of their buildings.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I hate being called a consultant. I'm like, that's the C word. Don't call me that. I am an advisor, I'm not here to feed into your delusions. I'm here to tell you what you need to hear, and you can take that as you will. But, finally, it's like, I've been calling myself the BS detector for 3 years, and I think this is the first year people finally recognize what I was talking about, and it's just so much bullshit. So what are some tips for people from your experience in construction and contracting for them to be able to pick up on bullshit consultants or people that don't know better?
Some of the tips is to fully vet out whoever you're hiring. Don't just take their word for it. There's a lot of people that said, "Oh yeah, I've worked on this on multiple facilities, but I can't tell you what they are because of non-disclosures." And if they say that they have a non-disclosures only go so far. You're allowed to tell who the name is. You're allowed to tell a few different things, but you can't use that as an end all be all. And a lot of times, you need to know who they worked for. You need to know what facilities they've built. You need to know if they actually gave the correct advice. It's vetting out their past is one of the largest parts about it. And if somebody won't give you that information, I'm sorry, I can't work with you. It's not going to work.
Referrals. I mean, recommendations. If people have a good work history, that's not something you need to hide. That's, then your customers would be glad to represent and tell people how good you did for them.
Exactly. And obviously proprietary information is something that growers keep dear to themselves, but all of the information that's out there, nobody's doing anything that's proprietary anymore. The internet is out there. Everybody knows how to grow. You can look it all up. You can figure it out.
It's literally called science. It's called botany. This is the funny thing is cannabis is not a magical one-off thing that nothing applies to it. It's a freaking plant. And if you can grow green peppers and tomatoes, because I remember the old days when you go to a hydro shop, you would tell them you're growing green peppers. That was the code because it's the same, very similar, so.
Exactly. Orchids, it's the same plant.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page with that. But yes, that is the number one issue that we see is that people haven't vetted out people's past before and done an in-depth research on who they're hiring for a couple $100,000 a year job. And you can wait to find the job that they do. You could say, find a couple $100,000 on a $15 million build. Okay, I made a mistake. But the decisions that those people are making could be catastrophic and add up to millions of dollars. And that's the issue. Totally. It's not the fact that you're hiring them to help you consult. It's the fact that they're the ones that are making major decisions and can cost an incredible amount of money.
Yes, I agree. I find that the more confident, it seems like last year and for the past couple of years, it's the guys that really know how to sell some bullshit, that are really hyped up and confident in whatever they're doing. They get all the investment, and it's the people that do good services. They're not, someone like me, I'm a very humble person. I'm not out there to brag about what I do. And I look at people that get paid $100,000 retainer and then screw people. And it's just crazy. I think you really have to be aware of the hype. You don't need hype. If someone's hyping you up, it's just work ethic. Really, that's all you should be looking for,
Well, a conversation just an example of what we had today, we were talking, we're talking about our team and everybody. And we said, the owner's rep that was there said, listen, I can get some good deals on some equipment and this and that. Is that okay with you? And I said, that's perfectly fine. If you can have something that's going to be the exact same what's spec'd out, just that is used, or it's a better deal. If you want to do that, I have no problem. We're not prideful whatsoever. We're here to give you the best product that we can give you. doesn't matter if you want to raise your hand and say, "Hey, I got the product. I got it. I'm fantastic. Great, you're fantastic. That's good. Let's move on to the next." And we're not prideful. We're humble. There's no issue giving somebody else the credit for what it is. But if somebody wants to come in and tell them that they're the boss and they want to handle the situation, it's usually not somebody you want to work with. And that's what we've seen a few different times.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. Is there any other warnings you'd like to say or anything else you would like to mention besides your website and how people can contact you?
First, we encourage you to check out our Instagram page and our partners at Agrify. They are coming up with some incredible new technology that they have patents on that nobody else can steal, and it could definitely help your growers out. They do financing. They will help you do your layout. They'll assist your growers in making it so you can get your maximum amount of yield and consistency throughout your product. There's plenty of different resources on that aspect. If you reach out to us on Instagram or my cell phone or email address, reach out, ask us questions. We're here to help.
What's your Instagram?
It's Valiant America.
Okay.
VALIANT America, all one word.
Okay, perfect. There's something I just remembered. A few years ago, I was working with, it turns out, a fraudulent microgrid battery system. And what I learned was there are a ton of tax incentives for different technology that uses renewable energy. And something I saw is that the East Coast has some good renewable energy programs. Do you guys ever, I don't know if Agrify or if you guys are able to work with equipment or things where people could get some tax incentives, take a little edge off the 280E?
Of course. Yep. So of course, there's a few different ways to do that. I mean, a leasing program will help you write off your expenses as a lease and an operational expense rather than a financial expense. So you can take advantage of not being able to write off your depreciation from 280E. Also, there's companies out there called Tycogens or Tycochills, where they use natural gas and a big V8 engine that turns up a chiller or turns in a generator, and you'll get a massive tax credit from the electrical company because that's not taking power away from the grid, it's creating its own. So there's plenty of different innovative technology out there that can help you with your tax credit, that can help you take your power off of the grid and give you in good standing with the state or whichever state that you're in out there. But the problem is it's hard to find. And it's like you said, you've ran into fraudulent companies before. You need to make sure that you're vetting out everybody that you're doing business with and have examples, ask for references, make sure everybody's on the up and up, because as many good contractors and as many good companies are there out there, there's equal or more people that are frauds and that are trying to lack of a better term, screw you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what is your website?
It's valiant-america.com.
Okay, perfect. I will be posting links to your social and your website and information about your company on the show notes of this episode. I appreciate you coming on and talking about what you guys do and what you've seen. I think it's important for people to realize that construction is a major part of getting licensing because there's really no places that are turnkey facilities. Generally, you have to build them out. So it's good to know that there are good companies because contractors don't have a very good reputation in general. It's always like, oh my God, my contractor ruined my roof or whatever. So thank you for doing good work, and thank you for coming on, and thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will be back next week.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you again. Have a great day.
You as well. Take care.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast host. It really helps us get the truth out to a larger audience. You can follow us on Instagram at CannabisPod and on LinkedIn at the Cannabis Detector. Show notes and links to articles referenced in this episode are available on our website, cannabispod.com. Is there a topic you want to hear, or do you have some BS you'd like to tell our audience? Send us a message on Instagram at CannabisPod. Stay skeptical.